Hello, hello. This is the My Artifact episode number 4122. Today's date is June 25, 2026. It's been almost like a night at almost like a 10:46 p.m. Okay, yeah. So first of all, should we no? I have to be talk about the something monsoon. Okay, so today like a heavily rain was poured and it was really good. I love it. I don't know why. Like basically it's this thing that na ki in the afternoon the entire rain was actually happened. I was really excited to talk about the rain and things and that. But right now my mood is not. Okay. I'm really happy by the way, but I wanted to talk about something. Okay. Let's just jump into the question. Alright, yeah. Alright. So question is wait. What if police demand user identity? Oh, that's a really good question. Alright, yeah. First of all, what exactly is this question and why am I asking this question to myself? I wanted to build a application called My Artifact. Okay. What exactly is this application? When you wrote the diary every single day, you cannot able to be write the diary the way that you wanted to. Why? Because your thought process are actually much more faster than your writing speed. Your writing speed is a kind of like a slower is not because of your thought process are kind of like a much more faster, is because of that your writing speed is kind of like a slower because you need to put lot of amount of effort to print your thoughts. I'm saying print your thoughts. Okay, yeah. You need a pen, you need a paper, you need a convenience, and even after that you cannot able to be kind of like a print your thoughts. Okay, that's why our writing speed is a kind of like a much more slower and it really required so much amount of effort to write the diary. But what if I'm gonna say instead of writing a diary, what if we could record a diary, like audio record a diary? The stuff that you are kind of like listening right now, this is my audio diary. I called it My Artifact. My Artifact episode number 4121. I am doing this thing for past 11 years. I'm doing this thing every single day. It adds so much amount of value inside of me because writing a diary is a self-reflection process, same as recording a diary or recording artifact is a self-reflection process. It adds so much amount of value in myself. The person that I'm became today and person that I will become tomorrow, it is all because of this artifact. The amount of value that it add inside of me, I wanted to share this value to the people. I wanted to share this process to the people so that people kind of like a feel that value inside of them. Okay, how do I supposed to do that? By building an application. My application is somewhat something like a YouTube platform. In a YouTube you kind of like upload your video, other people kind of like sees your video. Same thing, you kind of like a record your artifact, upload your artifact in artifact platform, other people kind of like listen your platform, listen your artifact in my platform. Okay. uh Before I wanted to build this application, I wanted to aware of all the possible consequences, specifically worst possible consequences. Okay. So I went to ChatGPT. I kind of like I said that key, this is my idea. Suggest me hundreds of question regarding about all the possible consequences will can happen. ChatGPT kind of like suggest me hundreds of possible question regarding about the consequences will can happen. This is one of those question. Now regarding about this question is kind of like I say very differently. It says that what if the police demand for user identity? Okay, if you're not really understanding this question, I'm gonna kind of like simplify this question. What is exactly police and what is exactly that? Okay. Now let me tell you one thing. When the people who kind of like record the artifact, they will kind of like talk about everything. What exactly happened their life and things and that. Obviously, they will not gonna mention their name, but they will kind of like tell the story. Okay, what exactly happened and things and that. Okay. Now let's just say a kind of like a particular imagine a particular girl who kind of like a recording artifact every single day, and suddenly she kind of like did suicide. Okay, yeah, no reason, like there is no reason at all. Suddenly she kind of like did suicide. She kind of like hang herself. So in that situation, everyone kind of like pointed towards her artifact, because kind of like somebody that ki she is a kind of like a, everyone kind of like a, her parents kind of like say this thing that ki she is actually talking to the phone and things and that. Most probably she kind of like a recording artifact. Okay, so usually police have a kind of like a need information regarding about that ki why she's kind of like did a suicide, what kind of like a reason, things and that. And most of the people are kind of like a pointed towards the artifact, that key kind of like a give her recording, like basically they will came to me say this thing that key this is a kind of like something happened, so I need a kind of like something evidence of that particular woman. So should I supposed to give that evidence, should I supposed to give her recording to the police? Well, I like it's a kind of like a things. Okay, if I like a basically is this thing that key I will kind of like a give the information, right? Like basically kind of like a help to the police regarding about that key something happened. I have to give the recording to the things. But how do I supposed to know that key who is that particular woman? Because I don't really have any information regarding about that key which person am I collecting information. Okay, nothing really at all. Okay, let me tell you one thing. What kind of like information that I'm collecting from the user? I'm collecting information, a geolocation, time, their artifact. That's it. Also, whatever in the artifact, she didn't really mention any kind of like a name, nothing really at all. Okay, so there is nothing really kind of like a any personal detail regarding about that particular user, nothing really at all. I don't have any information regarding about the user. But dude, you kind of like mentioned that geolocation. So from the geolocation is like geographic location. So you might have kind of like a location regarding about that, right? But let me tell you one thing. I am collecting information, not precise geolocation. Okay, like basically is this thing. When an app is a kind of like a somebody sending a kind of like a geolocation, so it does not kind of like a precise that much. Okay, it's kind of like a somebody have kind of like a wide difference regarding about almost like 100 meter and things and that. Probably I'm not really sure about the kind of like a things, but kind of like a somebody is this thing that key yeah, I have a kind of like a geolocation, I have a time, I have artifact, but I don't really know that who is that particular person. And from the geolocation I might not gonna track regarding about that key in 100 meter circumference, or maybe kind of like a 200-meter circumference regarding about where she came from. There are multiple users too. Okay, yeah, it's a kind of like a very much difficult to define that who is that particular person and things and that it's not really difficult, but still, okay, yeah, it's a little bit difficult. Okay, yeah, so basically I didn't really knew who is that particular person, because I am also not collecting the information. So how do I supposed to give that particular person artifact recording to the police? Okay, yeah, it's very kind of like a very kind of like a very like I don't know how do I supposed to give it. Okay, yeah. And if I found a way that I could able to be give it, I could kind of like give the evidence to the police and things and that regarding about all the to further investigation and things and that. In that situation, how do I supposed to make sure that whatever the stuff that she says is legit or right, or she is not faking it? Let me tell you one thing why. Okay, because let me tell you one thing. When you record the artifact, like I did record the artifact, I did talk honestly with myself regarding about everything that I talk and things and that. Even if I'm kind of like a somebody CEO, I am the things I kind of like a tell my user that do not lie and things and that. How do you so sure about that user will not gonna lie? User will not gonna lie, or maybe lie. How do you so sure about that thing? One thing. Another thing is that if they lie, then what exactly happened? They just say that particular woman kind of like a lied in the artifact and things and that. So that evidence is a kind of like a creating a false investigation. that is kind of like something wrong. I have to think about every possible point of perspective. Obviously, this will not gonna happen, but some people will kind of like do this thing. Okay. Yeah. Also, let me tell you one thing. Artifact is a kind of like a very personal thing. People talk shit in the artifact. I did talk in the artifact. I did talk shit in the artifact. There is no backing at all. There is no kind of like a things. When we record the artifact, at the spur of the moment, we talk about something that we might gonna regret. That is true. I also kind of like a talk something that I might regret. Okay, so basically is this saying that key, how do you so ensure that a particular person is actually talking is light, rigid, not lying, or kind of like some little things and that. It's very difficult. Okay, it's very difficult. Okay, and another thing is that ki if I kind of like give this information, then user might gonna kind of get confused. Why confused means what? Ki usually people talk shit, dude. Like let's just say a particular person kind of like talk about something that ki regarding about his government is kind of like stupid and shit and that. Okay, now I have a structure that ki every artifact kind of like a judge regarding about artifact is that if that particular person is a kind of like a talking shit shaming or kind of like a religious hate or kind of like a defaming another person, then kind of like a judgmental system kind of like a simply recommend to the less of less people, so that artifact will not gonna went viral. Okay, yeah, that okay, that is sure, that is kind of like the solution, right? Now basically imagine that a particular person is kind of like a talking something like this, like a defame and things and that. Okay, now this artifact does not get viral, but probably this person might gonna think that key like, dude, I kind of like said something, so what if tomorrow the kind of like police will came and kind of like arrest me because I kind of like talk about shit about the government and things and that. It is very difficult. Okay, yeah, people talk so many things regarding about that key, like a statement or things, they will talk about something that they might not proud of it. Why am I kind of like saying this thing? Because of that ki it's not because of that ki there is a one thing that I wanted to do. I don't know how do I supposed to do that. I don't really have any kind of like things, but I make sure that ki every artifact in my platform is not considered as a evidence, is not considered as a statement. Okay, yeah, because of this thing I am kind of like simply protecting myself, as well as I'm protecting user, as well as I'm protecting user identity. Okay, yeah. Why am I saying this thing? Because of that, as I mentioned, people talk shit, people will gonna talk shit. I, even if I try too much, I cannot able to be stop them. Every person have kind of like a different thought process, every person kind of like a look at the world very differently. It's very difficult to kind of like a things that what is actually right, what is actually wrong. Okay, so it is not a kind of like a things that he kind of like somebody I would kind of like provide the information to the police and things and that I would not gonna do this thing. Okay, yeah, the kind of like evidence and statement does not consider like an artifact is not considered as a kind of like evidence and statement. From this kind of like a things I'm protecting everything. But dude, if something happened, like a literally chaos happened, and kind of like a government really required a kind of like a user information, so in that situation, what should you supposed to do? Obviously, is this thing, it's not really that I'm kind of like hiding something. Definitely not. There is a complete transparency regarding about that. But I have to make sure the relation between my user, and I have to make sure relationship regarding about the government too. I need a sign paper, a kind of like a somebody investigation warrant, or kind of like a judge signature that key kind of like a, we have this case and we need a kind of like investigate, and we need a kind of like artifact for that particular person and things and that. After approval from that judge, from that court, from that kind of like a things, or kind of like a valid kind of like a somebody, a particular person, then and only then I will kind of like a give the information to the government, to the police, or to the kind of like a things and that. Okay, yeah. And in that situation, I also kind of like mention whatever the kind of like information that you get is not considered as a kind of like a simply evidence, is not considered as a kind of like a statement. I will kind of like give you the recording, but probably I have to think about that encryption too. But whatever, okay, if they kind of like mention, then I have to decrypt that kind of like things regarding about the kind of like user information, and kind of like give them to the kind of like authority body, okay, and kind of like say this is the kind of like a things. But still it's also a kind of like completely wrong, because I am kind of like as I mentioned, I kind of like mentioned that I will not gonna share the information, user information, to the anybody. If I'm kind of like doing it that, then it's a kind of like a valid thing. I really require a kind of like a solid proof regarding about the court order or kind of like a things, and then and only then I will violate that thing and kind of like somebody give the very 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 specific user information, not too much. Okay, yeah, if the police or kind of like if the court kind of like say this thing that we need at least like a thousands of peoples of kind of like some artifact, I will not gonna give that. Definitely not. Definitely not. Okay, if you need a kind of like a couple of peoples of artifact, I might gonna give that, but more than that I will not gonna give that. Okay, and also how that thing will gonna happen. Okay, yeah. Obviously every artifact is kind of like encrypted. Okay, yeah. So basically is this thing that key every artifact is actually encrypted. So I'm not really sure how do I supposed to proceed with this thing with the legal document and things and that. How do I supposed to give the information, because I don't really have information from the kind of like a geolocation might gonna found, but still. Okay, like in that situation. And also is this thing na ki there are so many things. There are almost like a 193 country. There are every country have kind of like a different laws regarding about things and that and that and that and that. Like how do I supposed to protect? So there is only one thing that I have to protect. Artifact is not considered as a kind of like evidence, is not considered as a statement. That's it. Okay, yeah. Like from this thing, I'm protecting myself, I'm protecting my country, I'm protecting the user. My user. Okay, their privacy is kind of like utmost important. And if you want that, ki I wanted to kind of like violate that privacy, I need a kind of like a legal thing, proof from their court, from their country, that key we need to investigate regarding about this particular person and things and that and that. Yeah. But why are you not letting the user, and why are you not letting kind of like give the user information to the government? Okay. There is a worse possible consequences will gonna happen. Okay, what is actually worst possible consequence will gonna happen? Okay, it's okay. If I'm kind of like giving the information to the government, then obviously it's a okay. Let me tell you one thing. Okay, one thing is that you wrote the diary. In the diary, you wrote the kind of like a something very 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 personal thing. Do you really think that you wanted to share? I am building the artifact. I am also kind of like on the line. I'm like, it's even more difficult for me to convince the people to record artifact. Okay, it's kind of like a things. And even after I did it, and I kind of like people started recording and things and that, it is my responsibility to make them privacy as it is as possible as it can. And this is a kind of like only first principle of the artifact, to make them private, to make them privacy. Okay, people are kind of like a recording artifact just because of that ki their information will not gonna leak anywhere at all. And this trust they kind of like a build in artifact, built in me. So I have to be keep that promise, I have to keep that trust. Even if the government, what does they do, things and that, I really wanted to help. Like basically it's not really that I don't want to give the help, things and that, but I need a kind of like a legal proof from the country, from their court and things. Then I will proceed, then I will violate that privacy only for specific person artifact. Okay, but another question arises. Okay, you are not taking the information from any user and things and that. Okay, yeah. So basically is this thing, you will have the entire information regarding about every user. Well, basically I don't know the user. Okay, yeah, like basically I don't really have any kind of like information. I have their artifact. In their artifact, they didn't really mention any name and things and that. In the future upgrade, I will have kind of like a things that AI will kind of like a trim out the name and things and that, or maybe kind of like a editing kind of like a setup in the application, so that user kind of like a trim out that particular audio part. There they mention kind of like a things will kind of trim out in the app level. This will also kind of like a, I will try to make sure that will gonna happen. So in that situation, I will not gonna have any user information from the geolocation. You might gonna track a kind of like a particular people, but it's also vague because okay, why am I kind of like a getting this geolocation for kind of like a spam and things and that. If I'm kind of like a really, if I'm kind of like a build a kind of like a internal structure regarding about that how we're supposed to control the spam, then I will not gonna take the any kind of like information regarding about the geolocation too. I might gonna take geolocation, but in kind of like a somely maybe kind of like a somely kilometer circumference point of perspective. Maybe instead of kind of like a 10 meter, 100 meter, I will kind of like a take the user information from 100 kilometer circumference point of perspective. Means like that within the 100 kilometer, that particular person might be there. Okay, yeah. A kind of like a simply specific city level. Means I didn't know that particular person where it come from, but probably that particular person came from the Wardha, Maharashtra, or maybe Nagpur, or maybe something somewhere else, or maybe kind of like a things, because 100 kilometer circumference area is a kind of like a much more kind of like a thing, so that I would also track the spam, kind of like simply keep it away from it, and also I will not gonna have the kind of like exact location from their user and things and that. Okay, so this is the kind of like things. Trust is a very much essential, and I will not gonna kind of like give the information and things and that. Am I doing it wrong? Am I doing it wrong? Yeah. Am I doing it wrong? Like basically not give the information to their government and things and that. I'm like basically this thing, I am trying to prove myself that key I am right, because like let me tell you one thing now, the people, okay, right now I am recording artifact. I am the only one who kind of like record the artifact. I have kind of like a most experienced person regarding about how much artifact kind of like affect the personality and things and that. There are so many things will gonna happen. Okay, but when you kind of like simply when the millions of people are kind of like a recording artifact, their data is a kind of like a very secret thing. Okay, and my internal things, my instinct are only one thing that telling me not to share the information to anybody, nothing really at all. Okay, because user kind of like give me information with they are trusting me. I will not gonna broke that trust. That is legit principle of artifact. Okay, so this is kind of like a things. Okay, am I doing it wrong? From personal point of perspective, if you're gonna ask me a Saurabh Authare, I'm gonna say yeah. But if you ask me a kind of like somebody chairman of the company, I might gonna say no. Why? Because of that key, for the kind of like a short purposes, it sound wrong, but long term point of perspective, it is a right. Because user will kind of like talk so many things. Who do you kind of like accountable for that? Every person is kind of like accountable for every artifact that they say, then it create a chaos things. A particular person might gonna think that key yesterday I kind of like a record artifact regarding about that key kind of like somebody defame the kind of like a government or things and that. So might be tomorrow I might get arrested. Probably is this thing. If I'm kind of like started sharing the information to the government and things and that. And also is this thing that the government will also kind of like spying on their people too regarding about what they think and do and that. So in that case, I also make sure that if the government are kind of like taking the user information, for what purposes? Okay. Like basically is this thing, if the government is kind of like taking secret for me, they kind of like say this thing, we have kind of like a court order, we have kind of like some judge order, kind of like give the information, things and that. I have to be tell then what is actually the problem actually happened. Okay, why you are kind of like taking this user information? If you are not giving me this information, why would I supposed to give the user information? If the government will try to kind of like, this is a lot of fucked up shit actually happened today. Okay, so it's a kind of like a maintaining the balance between the government and kind of like a user and things and that and that. It's not really that I would kind of like take the user side, but it's not really that I will take the kind of a government side. If the government decided that no, kind of like we will kind of like block this application or kind of like ban this application and things and that in that situation, I can't do anything at all because I am not the kind of like a citizen of their country. I am not have any control at all. Okay, yeah, they might kind of like simply, I don't know. So this is what it is. It's a kind of like a things that na ki maintaining the balance, making sure that na ki Artifact is a kind of like some of the best place, a platform where people kind of like sharing their thoughts so that it can add value in their life. And that's why I built the judgmental system regarding about all the possible worst possible Artifact are kind of like a people talk, because people talk shit. It should supposed to be filtered out. Judgment kind of like a will supposed to be happen by Adam or things and that. So yeah. Or you might have found another way to investigate. Artifact is not a kind of like a things. Okay. And also if you are a user, okay, if you are kind of like a listening right now, okay, do not talk about kind of like a everyday life what exactly happened. Okay, let me tell you one thing. What exactly happened now when I started recording Artifact, I kind of like talk about what exactly happened today. And I said this and that happened and that happened. I might mention the people name and things and that. It does not add any kind of like a value in you. Nothing really at all. If you wanted to kind of like somebody I realized this I kind of like started getting value from Artifact from almost like a maybe after 5 year, because before the 5 year, like early 5 year means 2015 to 2020, I was actually talking about shit, nothing really at all. It doesn't really add any kind of like a value. But when the COVID happened, and after the COVID, I started utilizing Artifact for kind of like a right purposes, to asking question to myself, to kind of like understand myself better and things and that. Okay, yeah. So if you are a user, okay, yeah, and if you want to add value from the Artifact, do not talk about what exactly happened your day and things and that. Talk about a question and answer, like basically self-development question or kind of like a things, or what do you want to become. Like let's just say you want to become a kind of like a pilot and things. Like what do you have to do? Go to ChatGPT, kind of like say I wanted to become a pilot. Suggest me hundreds of questions. ChatGPT kind of like suggest you hundreds of questions. Ask this question, give this answer to this question. So that what is actually happened that na, when you talk about how do you supposed to become a pilot and things and that, your possibility of chances to become pilot is actually more, because whatever you talk in the Artifact, more possibly chances that you will kind of like become that person in real life. If you talk about the physics, you are talk about the economics, you will become the economics person. If you talk about science, you become the physicist person. This is the power it value it hold Artifact. That value will not kind of like create when you talk about kind of like what is that happened through a day and things and that. So that's why kind of like things, you utilizing Artifact for right purposes, it will gonna add value in you. It kind of like shape your personality to kind of like much more better. But if you are kind of like talking Artifact regarding about that key, this particular person said this to me and that, obviously we are human, we kind of like a break, we are kind of like somebody talk about something, we kind of like get scary, we kind of like get kind of like angry regarding about something, we wanted to throw it out and things and that is true. But kind of like instead of kind of like things, kind of like channelizing something right way, you are kind of like something angry at somebody, instead of kind of like somebody mention the entire scenario and things and that, kind of like say that key, am I really angry, or like basically is this thing what kind of like make me angry, what kind of like somebody value it hurt inside of me. Okay, asking this question, and who is actually responsible for that? Am I the responsible? Because like basically in the nature's law, whatever that actually happened, it actually happened because of you. The worst thing actually happened is also because of you too, and good thing actually happened is also because of you too. So basically is this thing, ask this question that if that particular person is kind of like hurting me is because of I did something wrong or what, or things. Like basically is this thing, ask this question to yourself instead of kind of like blaming somebody. You will kind of like somebody just a blamer. Okay, to blame somebody, nothing really at all. As I mentioned, the better you use the Artifact, better you became. The worse you use Artifact, the worse you became. And this is the kind of like things, this is the kind of like stuff that I'm trying to tell you. If you are kind of like talking about something like good values, self-help or things, obviously this change will not gonna happen. It took me 5 years to understand this and that and that. I am kind of like expecting would be kind of like a, I don't know, but still is this thing I'm making sure that you will kind of like talk something nice question, because when you're asking question about something kind of like a good and things. Yeah. Now regarding about legal battle, I am also kind of like a say this thing, artifact is not considered as a statement, is not considered as evidence. Okay. Yeah. I don't know how we are supposed to kind of like do this thing, but maybe I have to do this thing because it is best for at least everybody. Yeah. This is it. I have to be end here. Thank you.